welcome back to What We Do With Our Money. Colton Hall and Ben McCann here. So today we're going to be talking about rental properties, kind of some things to look out for. There's a whole list here. Obviously, thank you guys. First of all, thank you guys for dropping by the show, giving us a listen. We greatly appreciate it and love you. Make sure you guys go ahead and subscribe on YouTube, iTunes, and whatever you guys listen to and watch on. And so today there's going to be a whole list of rental properties, what we look for, why rental properties are a good thing, understanding the market, the financial aspect of closing getting your first rental property, also breaking down the costs associated with it, the legality of things, and then also finding and managing your tenants and some stuff like that. And so there's also going to be a touch on with Ben here, kind of how he looks for things and kind of how he manages some of his properties, because I also know Black Mountain Properties is something that's going to be rolling out in January as well too. So Ben, let's just start by talking about why rental properties for you specifically and why you thought that was a good investment.
I didn't right away. Mm-hmm. And then when someone took me to the side and gave me the numbers, because I'm a huge numbers guy, and it made sense. Mm-hmm. And I didn't believe it.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, it is, for people that don't understand it, it is actually, it can feel pretty risky, but everybody needs a place to live. So I think like rental properties are a really good investment. You just have to do your research. You have to be very, very thorough on your research. Make sure you got everything covered. Because, I mean, just to qualify for a rental property, if you want to be a landlord, I mean, you're going to be looking at, you got to have a decent credit score. Your down payment, you're going to have, 15 to 25% down. Like, I have a great banker. My banker says I can basically buy anything I want as long as I can pay 20% of it.
Yep.
And then you really got to control that debt to income ratio before you jump into any kind of property or anything like that. And I would always suggest having a little bit of savings for that rental property so you have a backup in case someone doesn't pay rent. So, that 6 month seems to be the magic mark, because you can start eviction. I know everybody hates that word, but you can start eviction after the second month. And it really depends on your state. So if you're going out and renting in different states, like I think Colton has,
yep.
You really have to read the rules and stuff, because you can actually, like in South Dakota, you can't evict. There's certain rules where you can't evict someone during the winter months.
Yep.
So you got to be really careful with what's going on. And the people that are renting, if you get a bad renter, they know all of it. Mm-hmm. So make sure you're just as prepared as they are.
And there's so many different benefits to rental properties. I feel like when we'll go into all of the benefits here in a second, but I mean, there's so many different things, because usually if you just invest in the stock market, like if you want any regular investment, obviously you could start with a Roth IRA or whatever, but with rental properties, there's so many different things that you can do. And I just kind of wanted to run over a couple of statistics here for people, because I know people look at stats and, you got to take them at face value and for what they are. And so this is according to getflex.com here. And they got this from the IRS as well as the U.S. Census Bureau. So did you guys know that 10.6 million Americans earn income from rental properties? And so that's a lot. 10.6 million Americans are doing this, and it's something that they're earning. This is the second stat here, according to the U.S. Census and Landlordography, that landlords have an average income of $97,000 a year. And so that's just being a landlord. You could do your regular thing or your regular job, and then you can make some good money, but it's more of a long-term investment, which again, we'll get into a little bit later on. The third fact here is mom and pop landlords own 20.5 million rental units, and the average landlord has 3 properties. That's according to My Smart Move. So there's a lot of facts that go out into talking about the benefits of rental properties, but again, just making sure it works from a number standpoint, I would say, is the number one thing. That's at least what we were mainly worried about. And so as far as why rental properties, for me, I feel like $1 million isn't what it used to be. And so it's not like you can do really well with just investing in a Roth IRA and, working your 9-to-5 job, or if you want to really enjoy and make sure that you are secure after you reach retirement age, or even maybe beforehand, if you want to do rental properties as kind of a full-time gig, there's so many different benefits to being able to manage your own schedule. You can make your money, you can do your thing. And I think rental properties are just like, if you go about it the right way, you speak to the right people, you continue learning, because it's a never ending process. Like, you're always learning. I feel like everybody says that, but with rental properties, whether it's short-term, long-term, whatever it is, you're always learning. And so I think if you can do it the right way, you can really set yourself up for the future. And so the next thing we're going to talk about here is really understanding the market. And so, really researching the areas in which you want to invest. Ben, when you look at a rental property and you're looking at specific areas to invest, what are some major things that you're looking for?
Location is the most important thing in a rental property. So what I'm looking for is either a college, a military base, or something along those lines that people are going to need to rent. So military bases are really good because you are renting to the military. Usually they're good renters just because they have that background and they're going to take care of things. They're going to let you know when something's not working. Surprisingly, colleges, I've never had issues, or the way I rent, I guess I don't have issues, but I have never ran into any issues with that. So, and down south seems to be a lot better than the northern states. So I think location is definitely, and then you have to decide if you're going to do a long-term or a short-term rental. And with the short-term rentals, then you have to really vet the cities that you're renting in, because you have to make sure that there isn't going to be a law relatively soon that passes, that unless you're going to be grandfathered in, that passes, that isn't going to allow short-term rentals. So
Definitely starts out with location there. And I feel like as far as a military base, that's where me and my wife, and we'll get into kind of breaking down the financial aspects and kind of the different things we did with our rental properties. But that's where me and my wife invested, was in Warner Robins, Georgia. We invested in a home down there that, there's a military base down there, not any plans of closing anytime soon. It's established, but even just around the base, that still has a really good flourishing part of it. And so I think that, like you said, there's a lot of different things that you have to look for, but the number one thing definitely is the location of the place there. So, and I think you have to also look at it. Now, also, I forgot to mention Warner Robins, Georgia has a population of about 80,000 people. So a little less than Rapid, or kind of like on track with Rapid. But, just having that flexibility of, yes, the base there, but you also have an established population was a big reason as to why we did that.
yeah. And I think what you need to know too is there's definitely highlights in renting properties, but I think we also need to get into like some of the other parts of, being a landlord.
Yep.
Like when you choose to be a landlord, you have to choose the location. So you're going to have to choose the right property. If you don't choose the right property, it's not going to be profitable, and your ROI, which is return on investment, won't be worth it. And you want to shoot for that 10%.
Yep.
Is kind of that's what I usually shoot for. If you invest in like a real estate stock, Wall Street shoots for that 5 to 8%.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to make sure that whichever way you're doing it, because I do it through investing. I don't actually buy the property because there's less work on my end than I have to do.
Yep.
So, and you buy the property, correct?
Yeah, we buy the property. Yeah, go into that a little bit. So how do you do that? Because with the way we do it, we go through a property manager, we go through a real estate agent, we go through all these different avenues just to make sure our team is, the best it can possibly be, that's going to find us deals. How do you go through it from an investment perspective? I feel like that's kind of a new kind of concept.
So the way I looked at it when I was kind of looking at rental properties, my initial one was to buy property. And I you got to vet tenants. You got to find a reliable tenant. You have to find the location. You have to prep the unit after every renter, and then the maintenance. So you might get a call at midnight, and unless you get a really good management company, it's all on you. And if your management company doesn't want to answer the phone, it's still on you, So like I wanted to take that out of the equation, and I'm going to probably get less return from the way I do it. But I use so I found like REITs in the stock market, stuff like that, and I invest in those. And then I also use like roof stock and stuff. So they'll actually go out, they'll find the property, and if you're an you can become an investment company. So you and like 10 of your friends can get in together and invest, and then like put one of your buddies in charge of finding the management company, finding that, and then you can be the financial backer of that. So when you do that, I'm okay with that. But I didn't want the phone calls. I don't want to have to vet the tenants. I didn't want to have to do any of that.
You deal with enough already. So it's like, that is interesting though, because then you can bypass all of that. Like you said, find somebody else that you know that you've dealt with before that can deal with the rest of it. And then you can just be the investor. That's a smart way of going about it, because then you don't got to deal with any of the headaches.
That's very true. And I mean, at 10%, you can, because you're going to have 10% down to buy the property anyway. So that's kind of how I saw it. Like initially I was like, I don't know if I want to do that, because, you're not going to get as much return or anything like that. Mm-hmm. But looking into it, it's around here, it's 20%. You got to have 20% down of so $50,000 to $100,000. It's
a lot of money.
And you can invest that in something you don't even have to touch. And that's kind of what I like to invest my money in, is things I don't have to touch. Mm-hmm. And
because your time is way more valuable than that of, people that you trust and are experts in the field, and they can just do their thing. You can make money off of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm getting older. My kids are getting older, so I want to be able to spend as much time with them as possible. If this was 10 years ago, absolutely, I'd do it. But now my kids are in sports, and I don't want to miss anything. Last thing I need is my kids in the playoffs for his little kid football.
Yep.
And last thing I need is a tenant calling me in the middle of a football game going, hey, I need this.
Yep.
And me having to leave a football game and deal with it. I mean, that's just kind of me outweighing, like my family outweighs that stuff. So I am going to get a little bit less return potentially than if I own the property outright, but there's a lot less risk, I feel like, and there's a lot less work involved. And, like roof stock is decent. Fundrise is another good one. Mm-hmm. And if you got enough friends that are interested in it, and one of your friends are like, yeah, I want to take it off. I want to take this. He doesn't have to invest as much if he's going to take that on. And then you get 10 guys to invest, 10 grand, 9 guys to invest 10 grand. You got $90,000 that you can put down as your 20%. And then one of those guys could potentially just go and do it.
So how does for something like that, how does the splitting of the profit share, like whether it's the cash flow or whatever it is, how does that all work?
As far as which one?
So like if you like you said, you have 9 people that all invest into a property, say they put all put $90,000 in. How does so let's say that property makes $200 in cash flow a month or whatever it makes. How do you guys make money off of that?
When we deal with that, we don't really like $200. It just kind of sits in the account until the account builds up. And then what you do is you'll divvy it out as much as you invested. Usually what's the cleanest is everybody's invested the same amount. Or you've made an agreement where if you're not going to invest this amount, then you're in charge of this. So then you are like, some of them you'll be in charge of GCing the build of the apartment building.
Okay.
So that's your buy-in.
Okay.
So instead of having to pay a GC, they're GCing it. They're dealing with the headache of building it. And once that is in, then they're bought in.
So what's a GC?
GC is a general contractor.
Okay.
So they're the ones out getting the subcontractors, making sure the build is going smoothly. If there's any issues with the subcontractors, they're dealing with that. They're working with the title company to make sure the subcontractors get paid. They're working with the city to make sure that the buildings we have older communities around here, so we have some of them have to be specific colors for historical purposes. And I'm sure you run into that in the northeastern states and stuff like that too. But so they're dealing with that headache, and so then that's their buy-in. So what you're trying to do is make sure everybody's buy-in is the same, either monetarily or the labor.
Yep.
And it all works out.
Okay.
So that's kind of how we do it, and we do that with a couple of things. We do it with real estate. We also do it with like sports memorabilia.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So
yeah, that makes sense.
And that all started from like the roof stock and Fundrise idea. It was just like, we could do this on a smaller scale.
Yeah.
And we could get a bigger return.
Okay. I feel like you got to touch on the different financials. So you got the one side of being able just to invest your money like that. And then you have I don't want to say more traditional way, or at least the way that I've heard that's more common is the people that, when they're first starting out, they're the ones that do the research. They're the ones that look for those property management companies, the ones that really have to establish the relationships on that side of things. And so let's talk about some of the financial things when it comes to breaking down the costs that are associated with rental property. So, for example, I'll use my rental property or me and my wife's rental property in Warner Robins, Georgia. So, kind of going back to location, you really also have to know how much you can charge in each specific location. Like you really have to look at each, if this area is getting $1,500 rent, can we get that same amount of money? That's a big thing to look at too is, okay, yes or no. That's the question you always have to ask yourself and find an answer to. And then after that, that is really where you can really start to delve into. And so for us, sorry, go ahead, Ben.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, you really have to look at the market like Colton was saying, because usually I would say 95% of the time, if you go into like what homes are selling for, usually that means that you can rent for more, but not always.
Not always.
And and when you start to get into the bigger cities, you really have to, location is good for as far as like we have talked about like cities, but also location in those cities is really important for rental properties too. So what I would do is I'd go down and look at the property before I even bought it, just the one time, just to see, especially if you're like in a college or a military base, just see how close it is, because that's those are the renters you're trying to get, so that you want to make sure it accommodates them.
Absolutely. And I think another part of that too is like looking at the locations. I know that there are certain websites out there that do take into consideration, like they look at, things like activity in terms of criminal activity, so you can like gauge for yourself, like, is this a good area to invest in? Like, does it have a lot of issues? Is that a better place to invest over here? So like, there's different things you can look at in terms of location, because I believe it's actually against the law for real estate agents to just come out and say, hey, yeah, don't invest here. Like they can't say that. So that is one thing.
I've not around here, but I mean, they don't come out and say it, but they do say, they'll market it how it is, like, they'll tell you where it's at.
Yeah.
Real estate agents, I've learned, are really honest.
Oh, absolutely.
If you just straight up ask them, what do you think of this? I would say most of them will give them your honest opinion. And those guys are so knowledgeable about things. Like I'm lucky enough to be friends with a couple of really good ones.
Okay.
And they've definitely shown me the way.
Okay. As far as the financial side of things, so let's say, for instance, you invest, and again, I'm using our example here. We looked at a specific spot in Warner Robins, Georgia, that 70% of the people that bought there were investors. And so in this particular area, to give you guys a little bit of a background, the property that we bought we bought it for $125,000. Our budget was 120, but we had saved up enough that like we could go up a little bit, like, and be comfortable. But our biggest thing throughout the entire search was the 1% rule. So the 1% rule is basically saying that, if you have a property that say is $100,000, can you get $1,000 in rent? That's 1% of the actual rent. And can you cash flow from something like that? And for us, we looked at, I would say, probably 5 to 8 properties. And there were some properties that looked really good, but it was also kind of there's going to be repairs here. I don't like this part of town.
Did you go look at them, or did you look at them on the internet?
So our real estate agent, actually, she videoed the houses for us. She videoed all of the different rental properties, like all of the rooms. We took a close eye look, and she was also a real estate investor too. So she really was very integral in part to us being able to find that property that we were willing to invest in. So she would send us videos. Yeah, you got to be with the people that actually do this kind of a thing, know what to look for. And so there was houses that we wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole, and there were other houses that were like, man, yeah, I think we ended up putting down, I said at least 3 offers, but it was a really competitive time back in June before we closed, in June and May and April and all that. And so,
I think that's something you got to really understand about yourself too. Like, I mean, actually look at yourself and say, how much sweat equity am I going to put into this house?
Yep.
I mean, everybody's gung ho until it's time to be gung ho
and write a check.
And then they're like, well, maybe we can have someone else do it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, really, really do the numbers, but do them honestly.
Yep.
Because if you're going to do it yourself, you have to do it yourself.
You have to take all emotion out of like even if you love the property, you think, oh, it looks really cool. It's got a swimming pool. You know, I can imagine like a lot of my tenants might be happy here, or maybe it's really updated and there's not a lot of things to do, but maybe the foundation is great. Whatever it is, you have to just look at the numbers. It has to be all about, okay, does this make sense no matter what? Am I going to make money from this on paper? You have to take all emotion out of it, or at least in my experience.
Yeah. And you have to be honest with how much work you're actually going to put into the property.
Yep.
Because at a certain budget number, it might be smarter to do the, roof stock or fundrise or something like that until you earn enough to go into buying a property if you're not willing to put the work into the property.
Exactly.
Or like in your case, your property's in Georgia. So are you guys really going to fly down for like a week at a time, work all week, and then fly back, go back to your 9 to 5,
job,
and then, and just to get the property ready. Because that's another thing too that I didn't want to do is have to get the property ready for your tenants.
Oh yeah, it's a whole headache. And the nice thing about it is before the process, I would say we didn't have anything major in our property. We had to, I think there was small things like the cabinet doors, I think needed knobs or whatever. And like there was, I think the back door wouldn't lock. So we had to take care of a couple small things. And so we were like, okay, this isn't bad stuff. We can hire a handyman for a day to come in and take care of this stuff. Nothing huge. And then it's pretty much turnkey, meaning that they can move in right away.
Did your real estate agent help you find the handyman then?
Yes. And that's another thing too is
take advantage of the local resources.
Yes, and the people that they know, because if they've dealt with them a lot and they trust them, usually things tend to be pretty good.
And treat them fair, because you will be the first one off their list. They will not come back because they know they never have to see you.
Yep, exactly. And so that was, like I said, we got really lucky. Also with our property that we bought for $125, there was somebody, we believe they were trying to get out of the sale. So it was kind of, I don't want to say a distress sale, but they were trying to get out of the property. And so we fell into a really good situation where it was like, okay, this particular area, we could rent it for $1,500 because that's what rent was around the area. There's a lot of different expenses. So I'm going to break down all these different things that go into that $1,500. So starting with the first thing, you got to start with the mortgage. So the mortgage right there, it was about $600. $597 was.
Does that include your insurance?
It doesn't include insurance. We'll get into that in a second. I'm going to run down through my list here. So it starts out with a mortgage at about $597. I need to open up a calculator here as I kind of do this. So at $597 was the mortgage price, and then after that you go into vacancy rates, which is each month as you get cash flow or you get an income from the property, you put a certain amount towards vacancy. So you can have that plan in place. Okay, if nobody's renting my property, I've got a little bit of a nest egg here. Things are going well. So
and marketing the property for it being open, correct?
Yep, absolutely. And so property management also was one of those things where there's another expense where these are the guys that they call, like our tenants call if there's a problem. We don't actually have any interface with our tenants. And I agree and disagree that to a degree, but also I feel like, that's why we hired the property managers. They know the market, they know the local contractors, the guys that are going to do good jobs and all that stuff. So that was $180 a month. And so between mortgage, the expenses for vacancy and property management, we're already up to $852. And then property taxes on top of that. That's another thing is know what exactly the property taxes are to a penny. Like there's websites, the county that you are going to invest in, they have to share that information. That is, you can find that stuff online to be able to calculate that. Then you also have to go into insurance for the property, which for us was $46. So between the mortgage at $597, the vacancy at $75, the property management at $180, and the property taxes at $64, and then $46 for an insurance, we are at $962. And so you're really starting to see these expenses come up, but it all will make sense here in a short while. And so after we incorporate that, the next thing you got to go to is the maintenance side of things. And so I'm also just adding stuff up here on the fly to make sure that I'm getting things correct here. And so then after that, it's the insurance. Now it's the maintenance side of things, which is we budget about $120 a month just for that, as well as with the CapEx. And so with that, you're at $1,082. And the last thing is the HOA fee. Now for us, we bought in an area that does require an HOA fee at $199 a month, which is one of those things that you have to be really careful with an HOA, because you have to make sure that what they're going to pay for would be something to like that makes sense from a financial aspect. So that with the HOA fee, they cover landscaping, they cover if the property would ever need a new roof, they would pay for the new roof and come in and do the whole thing, take care of it. And so usually roofs I'm not a contract, but anywhere from 30 to 50 years, correct, is kind of what you can expect.
It really depends on the area.
Yeah.
So like if you live in South Dakota, like if you live in our area, you might 10 years and then you're going to get hail and,
Yeah.
but I mean, as far as like if you had a perfect area, yeah, then it would be, 30 to 50 years.
And and roofs are expensive. They're not cheap. I would say the general cost of a roof is 10 to 30 grand. Isn't that a fair?
It's close. Yeah. I mean, it really depends on what the type of roof, what your pitch is, how big the roof is, how it's even getting to a point where it's how high it is off the ground.
Yep.
Depends on how much it is. So
Yep.
yeah, 10 to 30, it has to be really broad, but yeah, I mean, always prepare for the worst.
Yep. Exactly. And so with the $199 HOA fee, we still had all of our expenses are $1,281 and our rent was $1,500. So we're cash flowing $219 from this one property. And cash flow, we do things a little bit different. And what we do is, okay, so we get that $219 a month, after every month, we put that into our business account. We want to kind of grow it a little bit before we do anything with it, because you never know what can happen. It's good to have the cash reserve. We want to do at least a 6-month emergency fund for that particular property. So, and I know people always say, oh, a 1-month emergency fund. Some of the Dave Ramsey fund people are going to get freaked out or whatever. No, 6-month emergency fund in our experience, because again, you never know what can happen. And that includes, 6-month emergency fund with all the expenses. So we want to make sure we have a good nest egg built up before we do start potentially taking money out of that property and maybe, investing it in other areas. But so that's kind of a rundown of all the things you got to keep out in mind for. And so,
are you going to leverage this property into another property?
I think that's kind of a thought, and my wife did come out here. So with our first one being with a condo, it was a little risky because yes, the HOA fees and all that, but we have over $200 in cash flow. So that's another thing you have to touch on is the current market is what are people getting in cash flow? What are they able to get for their properties? And at the current moment in time, we were lucky to get like 150 or something. That's why we shut the door on a lot of deals, because people just weren't getting those cash flow type of deals. So the fact that we got over that 200 mark, we're like, okay, we knew we were going to be safe with all of that. And so,
so what is your ROI?
So our ROI, I have to look at this because my wife sent me this whole long text here.
So what do you feel are some of the rewards of owning a rental property?
I think that there's a couple of different things, and I have a list here. So the first thing is you get that monthly cash flow. I know that people might just say that, okay, well, what do you mean by that? Okay, if you get $200 to $1,000 in monthly cash flow after you got all expenses taken care of, after you've got all that stuff taken care of, that's something where like, okay, you can spend it, but you're gonna have to pay taxes on that. So you got to be able to keep it in your account. You got to be able to know, okay, it's the extra income. So that's the number one thing is the extra income, but also somebody else is paying down your mortgage for that property. So if you have a property that somebody has lived in for 10 years, you have another tenant that's lived in there for a certain amount of time. Over time, somebody else is paying down your mortgage and you're not spending a dime of your own money to pay down that mortgage. And you can use a lot of that equity to invest in other opportunities. And that's the thing is it's completely passive, especially if you just say you give it to a property management company, literally every month, me and my wife talk about it, like once, I think, hey, did we get paid this month? Cool. It's one of those things where, that is, so it's the cash flow, which is the extra money. It is the fact that somebody else is paying down your rent, over an extended period of time, which again is something that you're like, okay, this is, it may not, it's definitely a long-term game, but that is something also that, for us, we really love is the fact that it's passive and we get money back on it. What do you like about and why do you feel that rental properties are such a good investment?
I think if you do the traditional way, like you're doing it, you definitely have if you do it right, it's mostly passive income. You can still work your regular job and not have to really worry about that. And that's kind of how I view passive. But like I said before, I own my own business, so I'm kind of working 7 days a week, so I can't really field those calls. That's why I'm doing it the way I'm doing it.
Yep.
And then real estate prices are going to constantly increase. I mean, we might see a flux where it goes down, but it will go up, eventually. So that's going to mean your investment's rising.
Yep.
As well, and then rental income, you can't tax it. It's not Social Security taxed, I don't believe.
I don't believe so, no.
And then, you can write off any kind of taxes you do pay on it.
Yep.
So that's always good. And a lot of people like it that it's a physical asset that you can drive by and be like, that's mine.
Yep.
On the downside of that though is your entry and exit costs can be kind of high,
Yep.
and then if you do need to, it's not as liquid as like how I do it. I like everything as liquid as possible for the most part. And
So when you say liquid, what are you referring to in that?
as liquid means I can take my money out as like and have money the next day.
Yep.
So when you own a home, you're going to have to sell that home, and it really depends on the market how fast that home's going to sell. So it's not as liquid as, you know, putting in to like a Fundrise or a stock or something like that, or getting a group of investors that, you know, if you're in the right group, you know, okay, if I need it, this dude will want my shares.
Yep.
You know, and you've kind of already talked about it. You guys are all buddies. Everything works. So yeah, that's why I don't do it, but I do definitely see some rewards into doing it the traditional way as well.
And there's a couple of other things, you know, obviously we mentioned the tax advantages, also the appreciation of the property. So if you buy a rental property, say it's $80,000 and it comes back appraised for $90,000 over a 10 to 30 year span, it is going to be appraised at for a lot more. Or usually, I think what the average growth is, I want to say it's like a couple of percent usually. So over an extended period of time, you know, if you have a rental property for 20 to 30 years, that property that you bought for $80,000, I mean, it's going to be worth a lot more money than it was when you first bought it. And so appreciation is definitely something. You know, building equity. You know, as you pay down the mortgage on your rental property, you build equity into that property, or the person that does pay that. Excuse me. Diversification. I feel like a lot of people, you know, it's the Roth IRA, it's the, you know, the stock market, it's the all the different things, but it's the fact that there's another. We were talking the other day. You don't put all your eggs into one basket, and this is just another egg that you can put in another basket. That okay, if it isn't doing well, identify why it's not doing well. You have to be able to. I think you have to be fluid in the way you think about investing and that kind of a thing. And I think real estate can help you do that. Also leverage. I know that real estate investments, they are really, and a lot of times they can allow you to leverage money by using a mortgage to purchase another property
And I think we can get in that in another episode
Yeah.
with the leverage stuff.
Yep.
Because that could be a whole episode.
Oh,
by
absolutely.
itself.
Yep.
I just think it's a really cool way to invest, because there's so many different ways to do it. Because you have Colton's way, you have my way, but you also have ways where I know people will build a townhome.
Yep.
And they will live on one side, and the other side will pay for the townhome. You know, so you're basically, they're making your payment, so you're able to free up income to invest in other places, or you can pay down that townhome eventually, save for a house, and then you're renting out both sides of the townhome.
Yep.
And you're going that way. There's just so many different ways to invest in real estate that I think this is just the tip of the iceberg as far as rental properties.
Absolutely. And there's like I'm not saying rental properties are for everyone. You need to find and do what's best for you. But with real estate, like you said, there's so many different options that you usually can find something that you're like, okay, I'm pretty comfortable. I may not be comfortable with writing a $50,000 check like I had to 3 months ago, but you might be comfortable with doing something like Ben, where it's like, okay, hey, I can put down 10 grand with 9 other guys and we can make our money back over an extended period of time.
Yeah. Or, I mean, look at the Fundrise, look at, and we don't get, obviously this is our first episode.
Yeah.
We're not sponsored by these guys, but Fundrise isn't bad. Roofstock isn't bad. Look at them and see if that's something that you want to work with.
Yep.
You know, and there's a ton of options out there. You know, you can, like I said, you can invest in the stock market with REITs and stuff like that. And there's different ways to approach this, but you have to find, like Colton was saying, you have to find the best way that works for you. And you really have to be honest with yourself as far as what you're comfortable with when it comes to that. Because the last thing you want to do is invest, panic, and need it back.
Yep.
You know?
Exactly.
So I would plan on, if you're going to do this, the money's gone.
I think the big thing there too is, over a long period of time, if you don't do it, you're just going to sit there and just keep psyching yourself out, just being like, oh, I'm looking for that perfect property. I'm looking for that perfect. It's not there. Like, you don't just wake up one day, oh, I found a property I'm gonna cash flow $1,000 on. Like, unless you know somebody, that's another thing. Connections are very big. We'll talk about connections in another episode. But you know, I think if the numbers make sense, if you feel confident in the deal, if you're looking at all the different things, and interest rates is another big thing too, obviously, with the way things are in the market. But you know, I think if at some point you just have to be able to, if things make sense, you got to be able to jump. Like you got to be able to make a decision when everything looks good. If you are confident in it, jump. And then again, I'm not saying, oh, everybody do it right away. No, you have to feel comfortable in it, but you also can't be on the other end and be like, I'm still holding out. I'm still holding out for that perfect deal. It's not going to happen. Like,
See, and I feel like everybody says there's only one way to enter the pool, and it's not to use the stairs.
no, yeah,
But
exactly.
when you're investing, you got to use the stairs.
Yeah, you
Some
gotta
people have to use the stairs.
Yeah.
Put your toe in.
Yep.
Try it. You know, really, really look at what you want to invest your money in because it's your money.
Yep, exactly. And so we also should touch on, the legality and the regulatory concerns you have to touch on. So, or at least look for in deals. So when you are trying to understand local laws, regulations, and tenant rights, it really is important to know, obviously if you're in different states that if tenants have a certain amount of protection, so you don't get squatters or people that don't pay their rent, which is something that can put a lot of pressure on you as a landlord, so it's really important to understand what the laws are there. It's really important to understand, the regulations, because like we touched on, there's certain states where they're starting to shut down being able to invest in rental properties. And it's one of those things where you are in a tough spot. If you have a rental property there, most of the time you'll be grandfathered in. But if you're an investor looking in the area, it's just you can't invest in that area because they're making laws that are putting regulations into that. And so it's really important to understand the laws that are being talked about, the laws that are currently in place, and really what the laws that can protect the tenants and make sure that it's the best deal for you in the end.
Oh yeah, and I think the best source, and this is going to sound silly, is Facebook. If you go onto Facebook and find like a city page or rummage sale page, even any kind of page that deals with that.
Groups.
Yes,
Facebook
groups on that city. You'll learn so much about that city, and you'll see kind of what the community is, and see if you actually want to be part of that community.
You'll also run into some pretty interesting people, but it is definitely a really good area for you to really kind of learn about the area and also just kind of know really what you're getting into. Absolutely.
And what I've seen with those groups is you can ask questions, and for the most part, you might get a couple smart butts, but a lot of people are really open and will tell you exactly how they feel about the community and what they actually want to see the community become.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think also another important thing is to kind of really look at potentially, you really do want to consult with a real estate attorney, because I feel like, just in the area, somebody that knows the area, that knows the laws, and I think in a lot of cases, your property management company will know somebody or at least has dealt with a lot with somebody that, again, that's where if you get the right team with the right property management company, it really does take a lot of the stress and a lot of the worry out of a situation like that. Like, hey, we know this guy, and a lot of them might know, like if you get into with somebody that invests as well, a lot of them will know the laws already. And so, as long as you have a really good rental property management company that knows all that stuff, that, deals with a lot of that stuff, that is definitely something definitely another benefit, I think, of having a rental property handle your stuff. Now, as far as managing and finding tenants, there's a lot of different things that go into this. And I feel like with our first tenant, we were already cautious with the investment side of things, but we were even more cautious with finding out a tenant. And I think there's a lot of different things. But for Ben, when you are looking at tenants and looking at to manage them, what are some tips maybe that you look at to make sure that it's a good fit for you?
So, like I said, I didn't do it your traditional way, but I have helped other people the traditional way.
Yep.
So we've talked to tenants, and a lot of times the biggest thing is to talk to other people about the tenant. Make sure you talk to the references that they put on, and make sure that the job they do have a steady job. But also you have to treat the tenants with respect. Like you have to be upfront, honest with the tenants. If something breaks, you have to make sure that you take care of it right away, because the most important thing with this whole investing thing is tenant landlord relationships. Absolutely. So even if you like holidays, so what I do or what we do or whatever, like during Christmas or something, you might knock down rent an extra $100 or something, because everybody knows you're buying Christmas presents, you're doing this, you're doing that, you're traveling for the holidays. Give them a little bit extra, especially on those years that if you sign a two-year lease or a year lease and say their lease is up in January, or something,
Yep.
you want to make sure you take care of them, give them opportunities, be flexible, but be firm with the dates you give so that they know they can't take advantage of you.
Yep.
It's a really fine line. And that's why either you have to be really good at it or your management company has to be really good at it of taking care of the tenants, but also being firm with the tenants.
Absolutely. And the thing is, you got to be so careful. You got to, like Ben touched on, you've got to talk to people about the tenant. So in other words, look at their renting history as well. Look at, I would call, if they provide those kind of references. And you're like, and I feel like if you know the people in the area and you know where they've lived, maybe sometimes you can go in and try to talk to some people about, the history of the tenants and all that. But kind of knowing like, okay, where they lived in the past, did they pay their bills on time? Are they good people? That kind of a thing. That's a luxury to have if you live in the area. If you don't, again, that's kind of something that at first me and my wife kind of played by ear, just trying to see, but we also talked to a couple of different people kind of on how to kind of go through the process. And I think
you can creep them on Facebook too.
Yeah, you can. That's another option. Yeah, you can look them up. I think for us, so I'm not going to give too much information about our tenant, but I will say that, there was a process where we did go through where it was like, okay, they don't have the best credit, but they have a co-signer for them that has excellent credit. And so in those particular situations, I don't think that I would recommend it for everybody. But if you are confident in, in your property management company and the job that they do, and also the tenant, if you feel like, okay, this is something where they have somebody that's going to co-sign for them that has excellent credit, usually it's something that you're like, it makes you feel a little bit better. If they don't have a co-signer and they don't have good credit, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I don't think that would be a move I would make.
No, it'd be a huge red flag, but you do have to give them the benefit of the doubt. What I do is always open lines of communication, basically let them know that I know.
Yep.
And 9 times out of 10, you'll never hear from them again.
Yep.
But if you have that one person that, actually explains the situation and maybe it makes sense, then it's still up to you, but then you might be able to do that and they'll appreciate that too. So, just keep that line of communication open, or make sure your property management company is keeping that line of communication open. But like I said, you have to be firm.
Yep.
You have to. And the rules are the rules. And we're all grown-ups and we all know the rules.
Yep. You can, nobody gets a free ride, unfortunately.
Yep.
But that's the reality of the situation. You signed a lease. Yes, you do have to deal with it. And I feel like you
just can't become soft with it.
Yeah.
So,
and I feel like you also have to, like, you don't know their full story, because I do know that I've heard people that, okay, they had horrible credit because they just got out of a divorce or something.
Yes.
It's like, so you don't know their story. So I think it's a tough decision. It's a tough kind of being able to look at tenants and kind of try to vet them out. But, usually you want to make sure they have good credit. You would, again, touch on their history. They've got a stable income. They've got all those boxes checked and all that. And, I think that it does come down to, again, discussing with the property management company, because they deal with a lot of this, and I think that,
and they see multiple, because your property management company is not just managing your properties, they're managing other people's properties.
Yep.
So, you're going to see people multiple times as a property manager. And, sometimes you've talked to them on the phone and it just doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
And you're just like, red flag. And you just throw it in the other pile.
Yeah. And I think a portion of that too is, when we talk about talk with your property management company, I think that, when it comes to handling like maintenance requests, let's say you get a really good tenant, or you feel like you're confident, they got a good credit score, all that stuff checks all the boxes, really making sure that you are 100% in with your property management company and how you handle maintenance requests. And also, like you said, building that good landlord-tenant relationship, just so that way they know that, you're not crooks, you're there to help them out too in certain ways, but also have that good relationship and understanding of like, hey, if something's broken, we're going to get it taken care of for you, because we want you to be taken care of, and making sure that everything is working for your family and everything is working properly.
Yeah, and another thing when you're vetting tenants is have a small fee for your application. It can be reimbursed to them later, or go towards rent or go towards the deposit if they're chosen. But that'll eliminate a lot of paperwork for yourself if you're doing it yourself, or it'll eliminate a lot. Or if you're doing a management company, they'll probably already have that in their process, that small fee, just so they can do the same. Otherwise you just have 1,000 applicants, and you might you might pick one and they might have already moved on.
Yeah, exactly.
So get them to invest in the property so you know they're actually interested.
Yep. Absolutely. And so, I think, we kind of gave you guys a general rundown on a lot of the ideas and a lot of things to look out for investing in your first real estate property. We touched on, why they're a good investment or why there's some different things as far as, they're more of, in some cases, whether it's short-term, long-term, we touched on the benefits of all that kind of stuff. We also kind of talked about understanding the market and which areas to kind of have an eye on, or at least what to look for in an area, we also touched on the financial aspects of like your list of all the different expenses you're going to have to cover with, between insurance, between repairs, between the property management costs, if you do decide to go that route, the mortgage, of course. So we touched on all that different stuff. And then we touched on kind of also what is a good ROI, or at least some things to look out for in that particular regard. And the potential revenue and the profitability of it. I feel like maybe that's something where you can add up over a long period of time. You can really start to see maybe if it's a cash flow that's a little low, but even over time, your appreciation and everything, it really does start to pay off for in the long run. Also, the legality of things.
The easiest way to do the legal stuff is let the legal people handle the legal stuff.
Slide it over.
It is worth it.
Yep, 100%. Unless you want to go to law school, I recommend just letting them handle it. Yes, and then also finding and managing your tenants, kind of some things to look out for.
And that's your most important part, I believe, is to make sure you have that good relationship. You find the right tenant to make it all work.
Yep.
ROI is great, and as long as your ROI is positive and you have a good tenant, you're in a good spot.
Absolutely. And I think, like I said, I really appreciate you guys for listening to us. Kind of our first episode, just kind of listening to some of our expertise. We'll be back, next week, kind of talking about some different things and, the next step in investing or, and in some of that stuff. Anything else you'd like to add, Ben?
We are not experts.
Not experts. just sharing from our perspective.
Yes.
Just kind of what we've seen and what we've dealt with, what we've done, that kind of a thing. And so also, if you guys like the show, please make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube as well as iTunes and all that stuff. Make sure you guys just keep following along for our weekly content and all that.
And Colton will have all these main points in the notes and stuff. And if you do have any questions, please just reach out on our email address. And that is
First Amendment Media SD@gmail.com. We'll put that in the comment section as well. Long one, but hey, it's that's kind of the way we do things.
That's how we vet.
Yeah, that's how we vet. Or you can send it to the what we do with our money @gmail.com. Pretty easy there with the name and everything. Yep. So you can send it to either one of those emails. We'll make sure that we vet those out.
I just became a follower of that.
Yes, there we go.
An hour ago.
I was like, come on, you're killing me, man. The host of the podcast, but no, we got it taken care of. So really appreciate you guys for coming along. Please make sure to subscribe, all that wonderful stuff. As far as the next topic, I think we can kind of go into a lot of different things. Next week, we'll touch on the difference between a Roth IRA and a traditional IRA and some things to look out for there. And
how to get around almost anything. Yep. If you're going to invest in a traditional IRA, how to move it into a Roth IRA and all that stuff. So it's going to definitely be interesting. And I think we got two different point of views on it, and I'm excited for it.
Yeah, me too. I think it's going to be really fun just to kind of look at really where this thing continues to take us, the different discussions we'll have, and then hopefully the different things we'll learn.
Yes, and we should start having guests probably next week. So we probably look at episode 4 for our first guest. And remember, they're not experts either. They're just telling you their story and what worked for them. So what I really want to push on is everybody has their own story.
Yep.
And everybody has a different way of doing it. That doesn't mean it's the wrong way. It doesn't mean it's the right way. But if it's your way.
Yep.
And if it works for you, it works for you.
Absolutely. And I think, if you guys want to keep up to date with all of the next guests and all that, you guys can like us on Facebook and all that. We'll have all the updates on who's coming on, kind of give brief teasers on their personal stories. But that's a good place to keep in touch with us and kind of keep up with all the content and stuff. So, well, thanks for coming on, you guys. And Ben and I will talk to you guys and with you guys next week.